Good morning. So this morning we're talking about mouths, how to draw a mouth. And to me, it's not one of the most difficult things to draw on the face. I find the eyes are more complex and more difficult to draw. Even the nose has a lot more basic shapes in it. So the nose is also a little bit more difficult. So the mouth, I think, is easy. That's quite easy to do if you know where to start and what the tips are for drawing a mouth. But once somebody smiles and they show you some teeth and you want to draw that, that's when it becomes difficult. To paint teeth and to draw teeth is one of the more difficult things. I'll talk about that a little bit later, what the tips are if you wanted to paint or draw a mouth that's open and you want to show the teeth. But for now, let's just go back to this one because I think that's the one I want to focus on for today. So for me, the most important tips would be I start with the middle line of the mouth. If I had to draw this mouth, I would start there. Because if you have to look at that mouth, the most defined line that I can see on this mouth is this middle line. It's the line that I look at immediately. So it's the line that gets formed by the upper lip and the lower lip. And if you look at people, everybody's middle line of the mouth will differ. I don't even think, I don't know if twins would be the same. It's such a unique line that. So if you can get this line right, observe it well, draw it in first. The rest almost becomes a lot easier. If you start with the rest of it and you don't start there, I find it quite difficult. But if I can start with that and I can just get that one line in there and observe it well, that's the first step. The second one would be, secondly, I would start with the shadow. I would do the shadow because this shadow is going to be different for every mouth. A thinner mouth, if I go down a little bit, a thinner mouth would be a lot higher up. The shadow would be a lot higher up. A fuller mouth, the shadow would be lower down. So in a sense, immediately if you add the shadow, you are defining the lower lip. You're placing the lower lip. And once you've placed the middle line of the lip and the shadow, you've got a lot going for you if you've done that well, because then you're starting to add the rest of the shapes. When you look at the mouth, what I, what I've learned over the years to teach other people to draw the mouth, it's difficult to get this sort of the pout or the fullness of the mouth to show that clearly. Is so difficult because you can do the shading, you can do a lot of things, but it's not so easy to get that so full. So I've developed a way of doing that and a way of teaching my students to help them to see how can you use basic shapes, because I believe if you can handle the basic shapes are before everything else. If you can see them and handle them well and draw them well, then the rest can be filled in after that. So the basic shapes in this mouth for me would be an oval there, two higher ovals over there, and two circles at the bottom. Remember when I'll demo that, Nana. So if you don't understand why I'm saying that, you'll see it in the video. I'm going to make shorter videos. It's easier to upload on YouTube. So you'll be seeing like 8 minutes, 8 minutes, 8 minutes. So this might be part 1 for now. So if it stops, just look for part 2 on the mouth. So another thing that you have to remember, if you look at these two lips, the upper lip and the upper lip and the lower lip, you can immediately, if I have to ask you as a student, which of the two is darker, it's quite evidently that it's the upper lip. So study people. If you sit in a coffee shop, just study the people a little bit and see, is it true? Is it actually that way when you look at somebody? And why do you think it is like that, that the upper lip is always a little bit darker than the lower lip? So if I go down, you'll see it over here. There it's quite close, but it's still a little bit darker. This one is also a little bit darker. That one's a little bit darker. That's definitely darker. So that's another tip. Always make the upper lip a little bit darker than the lower lip. And then a tip that is so crucial, if you get this wrong, you're going to end up with lips that look unnatural, almost like lip liner. So never make these two edges, hard edges. Don't put a heavy line in there, in these two parts. If you do that, it's going to seem like lip liner and it'll look unnatural. So again, look at people, study people. If somebody has lipstick on and lip liner, yeah, there'll definitely be a dark line there. But usually, if you study people, you'll see it almost blends in. It's a little bit darker because the tone is a little bit darker than the lips. The tone of the lips will be slightly darker than the tone of the skin, but it's definitely that there's no harsh line underneath these areas over here. And then another principle tip to remember is line following form. You can check out my previous videos, basic shapes, line following form. I discuss all of that and why it's important. But in this case, again, if you work against the shape that you have got here with your line work, you're gonna flatten this mouth quite easily. So line following form means it's quite a round object, so my lines will describe it and follow the form and shape it and not work against it. If I had to just do lines like this to try and shade this mouth, this whole thing will seem quite flat very quickly. Or if I had to shade like this here, I can lose this whole shape by using the wrong type of line. You'll see that in the demo as well. So what other tips are there? Remember that it's placed in a face, it's round, it curves up slightly at the corners, or because of the fact that a face is round, if you look at people, you'll see if you have to draw them, that the mouth is slightly curved on the sides. And it's just because if you think about an X shape, a face is not flat. So you're going to get that whole thing happening where the mouth is actually going around. As this face goes round, it's a round object, so will the mouth. So look what happens to the corners when you draw somebody. Okay, I think that's enough for part 1. I'm going to stop it there and start part 2.